My name is Celeste Donovan. I'm 37 years old, and just last Sunday, my husband of 14 years, Dr. Marcus Donovan, told me, over coffee and cold toast, that he wanted a divorce. No fight, no tears. Just clinical precision, as if he were delivering post-op instructions instead of dismantling the life we built together. He left for work 20 minutes later, adjusting his cufflinks as he stepped over our son's Lego spaceship on the floor. He didn't even flinch. If you had asked anyone in Portland's medical circles who we were, they'd have told you, the Donovans? Oh, they're perfect. Dream couple. Marcus, the rising star in neurosurgery at Horizon Medical, and me, the supportive wife who always remembered every spouse's name at galas, who baked for fundraisers, who never missed a school play. We lived in a restored Victorian near Laurelhurst Park, sunlight filtering through stained glass in the mornings, laughter echoing down our long hallway in the evenings. At least, that's the image we sold. Behind the curated perfection, I was dissolving. I had put my own career in forensic anthropology on hold to carry 2 pregnancies to term after 5 years of IVF, 3 miscarriages, and a long list of hormone shots that made me feel like a stranger in my own skin. I spent sleepless nights rocking colicky babies, checking Marcus's on-call calendar, cooking meals he barely touched when he got home, if he got home. He was always at the hospital, on rounds, in an emergency consult. But I still believed in us. I thought it was a season, a hard chapter in a bigger story. I thought we were on the same team. Until I found the earring, a gold stud, delicate, feminine, wedged between the passenger seat and the gearshift of his car. I was searching for a reusable grocery bag when my fingers grazed it. At first, I assumed it was mine, but it wasn't. I never wore gold, and certainly not anything with a tiny sapphire gemstone in the center. When I asked Marcus about it that night, he didn't even blink. One of the nurses, probably, he said, shrugging, already pulling off his tie. Must have fallen off in the carpool to the trauma conference. I nodded, said nothing, and made dinner. But something inside me shifted. The kind of stillness that comes before an earthquake. The next morning, I found a dry cleaning receipt tucked into the pocket of his white coat. One item caught my eye. Silk blouse, lavender. I don't own anything lavender, and Marcus doesn't do the dry cleaning. That was the moment I realized. I didn't know who my husband was anymore. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't pack a bag or call my sister. No! I started paying attention. Because something told me this wasn't just about infidelity. There was a deeper rot, something uglier, beneath the surface. And I intended to find it. That's when I started writing everything down. The human brain is funny. It doesn't always register betrayal all at once. It releases it in doses, like a sedative wearing off slowly after surgery. And for me, the next dose came a few days later, on a Wednesday morning, 9:06 a.m., while folding laundry in the upstairs hallway. I was separating the boys' clothes, Jonah's superhero shirts from Liam's space pajamas, when Marcus's phone buzzed on the table by our bedroom door. I shouldn't have looked. I never had before, not once in 14 years. But something about that buzz. It didn't sound like a calendar alert. It sounded like a siren. I picked up the phone. Just a glance. Just enough to see the preview. K. Last night still lingers on my skin. Let's not pretend anymore. When are you leaving her? The text glowed like a warning flare. My breath caught. My thumb hovered, trembling, then moved on its own, unlocking the phone, tapping through the message thread. Hundreds of texts, photos, voice memos, plans, jokes about me. She's planning some anniversary trip, poor thing. Still thinks there's something to celebrate. Tell her you're on Nicole and come back to bed. Let's toast to the day you're finally free. My legs gave out, and I sat there on the carpet, surrounded by mismatched socks and half-folded towels, staring at the screen like it was a bomb I couldn't disarm. That night, after I tucked the boys into bed, Jonah asking if Daddy would be home to help him with his school project, Liam still humming the bedtime song I always sang, I waited for Marcus in our bedroom, the same room where we'd brought our newborns home. where we had whispered prayers between fertility injections, where I had held his hand after my second miscarriage, and where he had promised me, "No matter what, we're in this to wither." I stood by the window, watching headlights pass on the street below, rehearsing what to say. But when he walked in and loosened his tie like any other night, I didn't need a script. "Are you sleeping with someone else?" I asked. No theatrics, just the question. Marcus blinked, his tie halfway off. Then, without hesitation, "Yes." The air in the room collapsed. "How long?" He took his time folding the tie over a chair. "Does it matter?" It did. Of course it did. But his indifference stunned me into silence. "I want a divorce," he said, like he was discussing weekend errands. "Why?" "I've outgrown this," he said, gesturing lazily to our home. "The routine, the PTA meetings, the charity brunches. I'm 42. If I'm going to start over, I need to do it now." My voice came out in a whisper, sharp-edged. "We built this life together. I sacrificed everything for you, my career, my body, my time." He laughed, low and bitter. "You organized bake sales, Celeste. I'm operating on brains." The words hit like a slap I never saw coming. "I'll take care of you," he added, as if offering a severance package. "You'll get the house, some money. We'll work out the custody." Custody of the boys we prayed for, the ones I carried and nursed and cried over when they had night fevers. He spoke like they were possessions, dividable, transferable. He slept in the guest room that night. I didn't sleep at all. By dawn, he was gone, off to the hospital as if nothing had happened. On the kitchen counter, he left a business card for a divorce attorney. Not a note, not a sorry, just a card. But what he didn't know was that I wouldn't be calling that number. No. I had someone else in mind, and I had no intention of going quietly. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't throw anything across the room or call my best friend in the middle of the night. That version of me, the woman who needed Marcus Donovan to feel whole, died somewhere between the first text message and that divorce attorney's business card. What remained was a woman with a quiet flame building in her chest. A fire not of heartbreak, but of clarity. That morning, after dropping Jonah and Liam off at school, I drove straight to a coffee shop I hadn't set foot in for years. The kind where you hear whispered legal strategy more often than espresso orders. And at one of the back booths, waiting with a laptop already open, sat Ivy Lang, Portland's most feared divorce attorney. She didn't do hand-holding. She didn't ask if I was okay. She clicked open a folder, looked me in the eye, and said, "He's already 5 moves ahead. We'll need 10. I nodded. Her first instruction was sharp and simple. Document everything. Every bank statement, insurance claim, child expense, asset list. Men like Marcus rarely cheat for sex alone. It's power. Control. There's always something financial underneath it all. That night, after the boys were asleep, I poured a glass of wine, opened our filing cabinet, and began. At first, it was just routine. Tax returns, insurance forms, mortgage documents. The kind of paperwork that built our life page by page. Then I saw it. A set of monthly withdrawals from our joint savings account. $4,800 here, $6,000 there. Each one labeled under a company I'd never heard of. Lark Haven Solutions. The amounts weren't small, and they weren't occasional. It had been happening for nearly 2 years. Almost $280,000 in total, siphoned away like a hidden current beneath our marriage. I stared at the name for a long time. Lark Haven Solutions. It sounded like a software startup, or a tax shelter. But Marcus wasn't a tech guy. He hated business meetings. He once called accountants the death of medicine. So why the secrecy? I pulled out his old laptop, the one he stopped using last year, when the hospital issued him a new work system. It took some digging, hidden folders, old logins, archived emails. But I found it, a brief string of correspondences. Clinical, encrypted, and terrifying. Marcus had been consulting, off the books, for a private genetic research facility just outside Seattle. Larkhaven Solutions was only a front. The real operation was listed as Project Daedalus. I didn't understand all the scientific terms, but some words were impossible to ignore. Embryo modification, informed consent waivers, sperm sample substitution, and most disturbingly, donor sequence realignment. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Was this connected to our IVF? Was this connected to Liam? I closed the laptop slowly, each breath tighter than the last. The next morning, I texted someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 6 years, someone who used to work in embryo tracking for the West Coast Fertility Network, the clinic Marcus and I had used. We'd lost touch after she moved back east, but I still had her number. Aisha called her. She responded within minutes. I was waiting for this day. I just didn't know it would come from you. We met that afternoon in the back corner of an old bookstore in downtown Portland. She looked older, sharper, worn down by knowledge most people never have to carry. Before I tell you anything, she said, you need to understand, what he did wasn't just betrayal, it was violation. Then she slid a sealed envelope across the table. In case you want to know the truth, she said, but once you open that, there's no going back. Inside was the contact for a discreet genetic testing service. No names, no records, just answers. That night, while Liam and Jonah brushed their teeth, I collected strands of hair from their brushes. I retrieved a comb from Marcus's bathroom drawer. I labeled everything carefully, methodically. No shaking hands, no tears, just purpose. The samples were sent off the next morning by private courier. Now I waited. For what, I wasn't yet ready to name. But deep down, I already knew. The waiting was the hardest part. Not the silence between phone calls or the polite lies I told the boys about why. Their father hadn't been home for dinner all week. Not even the pitying glances from the other moms at school drop-off. Those I could survive. It was the knowing. The haunting sense that the truth was already rooted somewhere in my gut, quietly blooming, and all that remained was confirmation. The results arrived exactly 8 days later. The envelope was thin, clinical, marked confidential. I stared at it on the kitchen counter for nearly 30 minutes, the dishwasher humming in the background, as if the hum alone could drown out the pounding in my chest. I opened it. My hands were steady. My breath was not. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested subjects. Probability of paternity, 0%. I read it once, twice, a third time. Then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was insane. Because I had lived 14 years in a marriage constructed on a lie so deliberate, so invasive, that it stripped me not just of trust, but of agency. He had ensured that I would never have children with him, not because of infertility, not because of chance, but because he had chosen it. Later, Aisha would explain it in more clinical terms. Marcus carried a dormant neurological gene. Rare, recessive, often passed without effect, but when active, it could lead to a degenerative disorder. He didn't want to risk passing that to his children, so instead of disclosing it, he arranged for donor embryos. Not once, not by accident, but every single time. I had cried over the failures, prayed during every round of IVF, begged the universe for just one healthy embryo. Meanwhile, the man I thought was praying beside me had already rewritten the ending. He watched me mourn the children we never had, and never told me they were never even his. And what chilled me most was the quiet deliberation of it all. The donors were anonymous. The lab records had been sealed, altered, wiped clean. If not for Aisha's private backups, screenshots, receipts, old log entries, it would have all vanished. But she had kept them, not out of spite, out of conscience. And now, so would I. That night, I printed 4 copies of the report. One for my lawyer, one for my newly opened safety deposit box, one to keep in my personal files, and one to deliver. In person, but not yet. Marcus still thought he was in control, still thought I was broken, defeated, grasping at dignity while he sipped Merlot with his lover, and drafted new beginnings from the high-rise apartment he now called home. Let him. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a reckoning. And it was coming. By the following Monday, Marcus's lawyer had sent over a custody proposal that made my hands shake, not with fear, but with fury. He wanted joint custody, with alternating weeks. He claimed my emotional instability, which he described as erratic behavior stemming from post-divorce stress, made me unfit to have full custody, as if I was the one who had fractured our family, as if I was some fragile, unbalanced mother, barely capable of tying her children's shoes. I forwarded the document to Ivy Lang. 10 minutes later, she called. "He's trying to flip the narrative," she said. "Make you the reactive one. That's what men like him do when they sense control slipping." She was right. I knew it. But the most dangerous thing he didn't know was that I had already begun to take it back. That afternoon, while the boys were at karate class, I drove to an office building on the outskirts of the city. Neutral facade, no signage, just a number on the glass. Inside, I met with a private forensic accountant Ivy recommended, Lena Price. She looked more like a librarian than a bloodhound, but her eyes lit up when I handed her the printed bank statements, tax records, and the strange trail of transfers to Lark Haven Solutions. "Give me 5 days," she said. "If he's hiding anything offshore, I'll find it." And he was. Marcus had been funneling money not just into Lark Haven, but into 2 shell corporations registered in Belize and the Cayman Islands. Accounts with names I didn't recognize, until Lena cross-referenced flight receipts and found that Marcus had traveled to both locations in the past year, under the pretense of medical conferences. It was elaborate, it was calculated, and it was all illegal. I met again with Aisha Calder, the former lab tech. We sat in the back of a quiet tea house, the air thick with jasmine and secrecy. She brought a small laptop, the same one she'd used during her time at the fertility clinic. On it, a hidden archive of digital records, internal memos, scanned procedural logs. One folder was labeled Non-Consent Substitutions. Inside I saw my name. Patient ID, number F02891. Embryo substitution, approved by Dr. Marcus Donovan. Donor ID, anonymous, genetically cleared. Rationale, patient unaware, long-term risk management. Risk management, that was his phrase for deleting my reproductive rights. I stared at the screen so long that Aisha placed a hand on mine. "You're not alone in this," she said quietly. "There are others. You were just the one who had the most to lose, and now the most to reveal." I left with a flash drive, encrypted, and a name. Michael Sandler, head investigator with the Oregon Medical Oversight Task Force. Aisha had already tipped him off. The next day, I sat across from Agent Sandler in a plain office with soundproof walls and a locked filing cabinet in the corner. He was in his 50s, gray around the temples, no nonsense. He listened, and then he said, "What you have here isn't just grounds for civil action, it's criminal. Medical fraud, genetic manipulation, potential human subject violations. If we move forward, we'll need more than records. We'll need his voice, his acknowledgement." I knew exactly how to get it, because if there's one thing Marcus Donovan couldn't resist, it was the sound of his own brilliance. That evening, during our scheduled co-parenting Zoom call, I let the camera roll as I casually brought up Liam's recent doctor's appointment. "They want to do more tests, just to be sure," I said. Marcus frowned. "What tests?" "Genetic screening," I said, "for neurological conditions. You know, just to rule anything out." He hesitated. "That's not necessary." "Why not?" He looked away. "Because I already had them screened, years ago. Privately." "You tested our children at that without telling me?" "I'm their father, and a doctor. I made a medical decision." I kept my face neutral, though my heart thundered. "Interesting. You were concerned about passing something down, weren't you?" He shifted in his chair. "That was never going to happen." Click. Recording saved. I sent the file to Agent Sandler that same night. The storm had arrived, and Marcus had no idea he was standing directly in its path. 2 weeks later, An ivory envelope arrived at my door. Heavy cardstock, the hospital's crest embossed in gold at the top left. Inside was an invitation to the Cascade Medical Advancement Gala, the most prestigious event of the year. Black tie, champagne, speeches, applause. And this year, they were awarding Dr. Marcus Donovan the Excellence in Medical Ethics Award. The irony almost made me choke. I turned the envelope over in my hands. Most likely, it had been mailed before the board knew what I knew, what I held, before Agent Sandler presented them with the preliminary findings, before the names, the documents, the audio recording. But they hadn't canceled the event, which meant they were planning something else. I reached out to Sandler that afternoon. "We're moving fast," he said. "The board has scheduled an emergency session right before the gala. Closed doors. You'll be updated." I nodded. "Good. Because I'll be attending." He paused. "You sure?" "Absolutely," I said. He made me wear silence for 14 years. It's time I wore something else. That night, I stood in front of my closet, pushing past the comfortable, the safe. I pulled out a black satin gown I hadn't worn in years. Marcus used to say it was too loud, that it didn't suit the wife of a surgeon. I tried it on, it fit better than ever. On the night of the gala, I arrived alone. Hair swept into a soft twist, the diamond earrings Marcus had once given me, catching the light like small weapons. The air was thick with ambition, smiles sharpened like scalpels, laughter rehearsed. I moved through the room like a ghost of the life I once lived. I saw him almost immediately. Marcus stood by the champagne fountain, tuxedo crisp, hand resting on the lower back of his mistress, a brunette in a wine-colored gown I instantly recognized from an online boutique, custom only. The same woman from the text messages. Her name, I had learned, was Kendra Valin, a bioethicist. A cruel little irony. They didn't see me at first, but others did. The wives, the doctors, the ones who used to pretend not to see me at all. Some whispered. Some gave polite, distant nods. Some looked uneasy, like they knew something was coming and weren't sure whose side to be on. I didn't mind. Let them watch. At precisely 7:25 p.m., the board chair, Dr. Warren Hale, took the stage. His voice echoed through the crystal chandeliers and white linen air. "Tonight, we recognize a man whose contributions to neuroscience have saved lives." Applause. I didn't clap. "Whose commitment to innovation and integrity sets the standard for all of us." I glanced at Marcus. He was smiling like a politician. "And whose leadership has shaped the ethical landscape of this hospital." And then, Dr. Hale's eyes flicked down to a small note in his hand. Just for a second, just enough. He cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Marcus Donovan." Thunderous applause, the room lit with admiration and pride. Marcus walked to the stage with the confidence of a man convinced the world still belonged to him. He took the mic, smiled humbly. "Ethics," he began, "isn't just policy, it's principle, a compass in the fog. We doctors, we are entrusted with the sacred responsibility of life. We must always ask not just if we can, but if we should." I watched Kendra from across the room. Her smile was wide. But her eyes, they were starting to flicker. Something wasn't right, not yet, but soon. And just as Marcus thanked the board, the applause having died down, the double doors to the ballroom opened quietly, and in walked two plainclothes investigators, followed by Dr. Hale, now walking briskly. A hush spread like smoke. Dr. Hale took the mic again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, "we appreciate your attendance tonight. However, we have just been made aware of new information, serious ethical violations currently under federal investigation. At this time, Dr. Donovan is being relieved of all hospital duties pending review." Marcus's smile shattered mid-expression. "What is this?" he barked. Agent Sandler stepped forward. "Dr. Donovan, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." Whispers erupted, gasps, flashbulbs, phones, stares. "Are you serious?" Marcus shouted. This is insane! I've given this hospital everything! I stepped forward, people turned, and I looked him in the eye. No, I said, loud enough for the room to hear. You took everything. His face twisted, not in rage, but in recognition. That I had done this, that I had been quiet, meticulous, patient. The reckoning had come, and it had my name written all over it. The headlines hit the next morning. Award-winning neurosurgeon arrested at ethics gala. Donovan investigation uncovers alleged IVF tampering, offshore accounts. Hospital under fire for years of fertility fraud. I watched the news from my kitchen table, coffee cooling in my hands, while the boys built Lego towers in the next room. They didn't know. Not yet. To them, Daddy was on a work trip, and Mommy had a lot of phone calls lately. I would tell them the truth, eventually. But when the time was right. And when they were ready. Because what do you say to your children when the man they called Dad deliberately ensured they wouldn't be his? What do you say when your whole family was built on a genetic lie? You wait, and you protect them. That was my job now. Within days, the board at Cascade Medical suspended Marcus's medical license pending formal review. The hospital launched a full-scale internal investigation. Patients began coming forward. Not just former IVF families, but neurological patients, research volunteers, donors who had signed forms they barely understood. Some recalled vague conversations with Marcus. Others had documents that mysteriously disappeared. I met with Agent Sandler again, this time not in a plain office, but in a federal building downtown. What started as a domestic divorce had spiraled into a multi-agency investigation spanning fertility fraud, financial crimes, and medical ethics violations. You started something that's going to change how reproductive oversight is handled in this country, he told me, sliding over a stack of statements. But we'll need your continued cooperation. He didn't have to ask twice. But I didn't stop there. With Ivy Lang's guidance, I filed a civil suit against both Marcus and the fertility clinic for non-consensual use of reproductive materials, emotional trauma, and concealment of medical risks. Aisha Calder agreed to testify as a key witness. Lena, the forensic accountant, submitted a full report tracing nearly $2.1 million in hidden assets, money siphoned from research grants, patient billing fraud, and clinic kickbacks. The numbers told a story just as clearly as the DNA had, and it was damning. But perhaps the most unexpected moment came 2 weeks later, when I received a message through Ivy's assistant. A woman named Dr. Meredith Chan, Marcus's former colleague, requested a private meeting. We met at a quiet cafe in the Pearl District. She was soft-spoken, nervous. She slid a manila folder across the table, then looked at me with watery eyes. I stayed silent, she said. Too long. I thought maybe I'd lose my job, but now, I can't anymore. Inside were patient memos Marcus had altered, changing embryo assignments, modifying screening reports, even overriding donor flags without authorization. You were right to bring this out, Meredith said. There are children out there, whose families still don't know, who deserve answers. That night, I sat in bed rereading every line, every falsified note, every signature. Marcus had manipulated not just my life, but dozens of others, people who trusted him just like I had. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about truth. And if I had to burn every illusion to find it, I would. Because from the ashes, something stronger was beginning to rise. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the gallery, their pens twitching in anticipation. Former patients whispered anxiously, clutching folders filled with hope and fear. At the defense table sat Marcus, pale and gaunt in a gray suit that once hugged him like power, but now hung off him like regret. He wouldn't look at me. His legal team tried every tactic, medical necessity, professional discretion, confidentiality agreements, but none of it changed the facts, the forged authorizations, the substituted specimens, the offshore money trail, the betrayal. When it was my turn to take the stand, I didn't rehearse. I didn't need to. I looked at the judge, then the jury, then at the man who had once held my hand through the IVF injections and said, "This is our miracle." I told them the truth, not just the clinical facts, but the human cost, what it feels like to mourn a child that never existed, what it does to a woman to learn that her motherhood was built on manipulation, not love, how it hollows you out, how it sets something burning in your bones that no apology could ever cool. The silence in the courtroom was total. Even Marcus didn't interrupt. When I stepped down, I didn't look back, because I didn't need to. The verdict came 2 days later. Guilty. On all counts: medical fraud, financial crimes, violation of reproductive consent laws. He was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. The fertility clinic lost its license permanently. Civil suits began flooding in. Ethics panels were established in 4 states modeled after the evidence we uncovered. My testimony had become a benchmark in reproductive rights cases. But none of that compared to the moment I sat Jonah and Liam down on our front porch. They were old enough to understand some of it. Not the legal terms, not the science, but the emotion, the betrayal. I held their hands as I explained the truth. Not as a scandal, not as revenge, but as something they had a right to know. I told them that biology doesn't define love, that being their mother had been the most real thing in my life, even if the man who helped bring them into the world had never intended to be their father. Jonah cried. Liam asked if he was still allowed to be proud of his science fair project. I smiled and said, "You should be proud of everything that makes you who you are." That night, after they were asleep, I stepped into my study, the room Marcus once called pointless. It was now filled with papers, testimonies, transcripts, letters from other women who said, "Your story gave me the courage to ask." I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and typed the first line of my book. This is not a story about a man who lied. It is a story about a woman who finally told the truth, and this time, it was mine.